Colton Brown, our infrastructure coordinator, and then myself. You can contact us by the email that you see that will go to all of us. So if you have any questions, please let us know. Here's our agenda for today. We're going to talk about the EV registrations update. Then we'll go into talking about the history of the NEVI program, what we've done thus far, and then we'll talk about why you are here, round 2 of the Western region. And then we'll have a time where we will take questions and hopefully give you answers. So at this time, we'd like you to take a moment and complete the poll questions. Okay, it looks like mostly we have local government, but there's some utilities, nonprofits, engineering consultants. Thank you. Derek, you want to put up the next poll? Oh. All right, it looks like we have a lot of people that have not been involved in our prior funding, so that'll be great. We'll talk about where you can get more information beyond this webinar and answers to your questions. Derek? All right, I see a lot of people that are enthusiastic about submitting proposals. That's great. Next one. Okay, I see some people that are saying, what survey? Derek will put the survey link in the chat, and then you will be able to participate in that interested organization survey. And this is where people can find each other, people that would like charging on their site, and people that want to put charging on others' sites. Thank you, Derek. Okay, I think that's it for the survey. Thank you. Okay, we're going to talk about the EV registrations in PA. As you can see, the numbers keep on rising despite EV adoption headwinds, such as the end of federal rebates last year. Helpful maybe are used EVs coming on the market, and even possibly the recent fluctuation in gas prices help to keep these numbers moving forward. We have this available to anyone on our website. It's a registration interactive map where you can go on and click on a county or click on a zip code. You can search by county and zip code also. So that way you can see where most of the registrations are. Sometimes there's an anomaly where there might be one EV in a very sparsely populated county or area. So sometimes that'll look darker than maybe it should compared to, say, Philadelphia. But yeah, feel free to try it out. Okay, now we're on to Derek. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Dorothy. Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining us here today. We're really excited to be putting out another round of NEVI, and I'm going to kind of start with getting everyone up to speed with what NEVI is, where we've been, and kind of how we got to where we are today. After that, we'll switch over to talking about the funding round itself, get you kind of acclimated to some things about how the funding round will work, and then go into some technical details to finish out with Colton after me. After that, as Dorothy said, we'll have some time for Q&A. So stick with us through this. We'll kind of give you the background to start. So NEVI, or the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program in Pennsylvania, really results in about $171.5 million that PennDOT is putting towards public EV charging. That money has been made available to us over the course of 5 federal fiscal years. And to date, we had to submit a number of different plans for how we're going to use those funds. We have completed and have had all those plans approved. So that means we have unlocked all $171.5 million to put towards funding rounds, and we have obligated all of those funds to this point. So we are now trying to put out the remaining amount of our NEVI funds in Pennsylvania. So really what this means and where we had to start with was our alternative fuel corridors. So this is mostly our primary interstates and a couple US routes such as 30, 15, 1, and 422. Over those rounds, we did have to build out EV chargers every 50 miles. And so what we were seeking with those initial rounds of NEVI was build out certification from the FHWA or USDOT. In those rounds, we were required to build, like I mentioned, every 50 miles at an EV charging station within 1 mile of those highways. They were required to be DC fast chargers, publicly available, required to have CCS connectors, and all be at least 150 kilowatts per port. So really a lot of structured rules around those initial rounds of NEVI, and we did get through each of those rounds. So what that led us to through these previous funding rounds was a total of 92 projects through 47 different counties in Pennsylvania. And that took up about $61.9 million of that 171.5 I mentioned earlier. So these are all in varying stages. We have a lot of projects that have reached completion to this point, a large number of those in construction as well, and a couple more that are just finishing up towards design phase. And most recently, 12 of those in our corridor connections program that were awarded and just in the environmental approval stages at this point. So where you can see all this, we have an interactive map out there. It's a GIS map. You can click on each of these different locations, find out how much was funded, who received the funding, where it's located, and what stage the project is in, whether it's operational, in progress, or just planned at this point. So that's out again on our pa.gov/EV community. You can check it out on that or our NEVI homepage out on PennDOT's website. So to date, we do have 37 of those 92 projects open and operating, and we're proud to say that's the most out of any state in the country. And we continue to open EV charging stations through NEVI. Throughout the course of this year, we're going to have quite a number more opening through the summer and throughout the end of the year, a lot of those being in construction right now. So here's just a couple pictures of some of our earlier stations that have opened to this point. And again, you can go on and check out any of those on the map, each of those being through our initial AFC rounds. So these are all DC fast chargers to this point. And everything that's kind of led up to this point has been those DC fast chargers along the interstates. We do obviously collect the data from our charging stations through EV Chart and as required through the program and with the funding. So to date, well, at least up through March 31st of this year, we've had over 100,000 EV charging sessions with our NEVI funded chargers, accumulating to about 4.2 million kilowatt hours of electricity and reducing CO2 emissions by about approximately 2.7 thousand metric tons. So really getting some great usage and great data out of these stations. We're continuing to update these. As we get the quarterly data in, we'll update this. And we also host these numbers out on our website. So very proud of the progress and some of the usage we're getting out at these stations so far. Also proud to say that, as I mentioned, through those initial funding rounds, we had to build out the alternative fuel corridors, and we did submit and receive approval for that AFC build out back on September of last year. So what that let us do was go into what we're now calling either post AFC or our community funding rounds, which gives PennDOT a lot more flexibility to invest the remaining NEVI funds. So this allows us to build off of those AFCs, gets into different charging levels, and has led us into what we have built for our EV charging community program today. So happy to say we have that build out. We were the second state overall to receive that full build out and first after recent guidance was updated last year. What we did from there was we pulled together our community phase framework. So through this, we have already put out and selected projects under corridor connections. So that was mainly an extension of our AFC projects and kind of filling more gaps for that long distance travel and the higher speed charging projects that we felt we still needed along some of our Pennsylvania routes that were not considered alternative fuel corridors. What we're now working towards and what we're here to talk about today is our community charging. So really putting the bulk of that remaining funding towards getting out into Pennsylvania communities. This will total just over $100 million for what we're doing with the remaining NEVI funds. And then critical investments is really just sort of a hold line. If there's anything we felt was missing from the prior two rounds, we will look to invest funds into that community critical investments line. We're not totally sure what that looks like yet, or if we will even use it. We'll kind of see the results of corridor connections and community charging first. And you can, if you're interested, go see kind of all of our thought that we put into the community phase framework. Really, what we did was build that out on a lot of community feedback. So we did a lot of outreach to the public and interested parties, stakeholders, to try to build out what our community phase framework looks like. So all of the methodology and all the thought that we put into building these rounds out is hosted in that document. So that leads us to really what we're here to talk about today, the community charging funding rounds. I'm going to give you a brief overview and summary of really what those are, how we're breaking them out into 4 different regions, and then we'll go into the specific round that we're opening up for funding here is the Western region after that. So I mentioned earlier, we're investing about $100 million into getting charging into our communities. So right now, that's looking right around $105 million or so that we're going to put into each of these rounds. All locations in Pennsylvania that are publicly available are eligible to apply. So this is a big distinction between our earlier rounds. We were restricted to sticking within, a mile of those alternative fuel corridors and every 50 miles along the interstates. Really now what we're doing is opening up the entire state. If it's publicly available, it will be eligible to apply. And then any organization that is registered to do business in Pennsylvania is also eligible to apply for funding. And similar to prior NEVI rounds, we can fund up to 80% of the cost to design and install that EV charging station. So it is a cost share program. There's an 80% maximum that comes out of the NEVI funding for these projects. I mentioned earlier, we have 4 regions. To date, we've actually already advertised the Southeast region all the way back in February of this year. That is currently open for proposals, and the deadline for that is August 21st. What we're here to talk about today is the Western region. That Western region was announced back on June 12th, just earlier this month, and we will have a deadline for that one of November 20th. So if you have any questions or want to find more info on that, need to find anything like dates or links, all of that is hosted on that pa.gov/EV community website. So feel free to check that out. We will have everything out there about the funding opportunity and any other resources that you'll need on that website. So on the website, we have a couple resources for you. There's a flyer to kind of spread the word and get it out to different interested stakeholders or any other project partners you might have interested in working with. The interested organizations survey, we mentioned that earlier, and I dropped a link to it in the chat. It's really a resource for anyone that's interested in being part of the NEVI project to connect. So out there, we provide an opportunity to find different contacts, to find businesses, local businesses, but also connect those businesses with charging providers, turnkey services, or even labor that can provide the work. So really, anyone interested in being some part of a NEVI project, you can go and fill out that survey, and hopefully it will help you connect with others interested in projects as well. There's also a map of the 4 regions, so just showed that on the last slide, how those are broken out by each of the counties, and a timeline for the funding rounds that I showed on the last slide. All that's out there on the website as well. And then lastly, there's a couple other resources, such as a presentation that gives you a brief overview, funding opportunity documents that really get into the deep details of the requirements around the round, all of the rules of how it works, how everything will be structured throughout the projects from award all the way out through completion and the 5 years of O&M. All that's covered in the funding opportunity documents. And then any sort of frequently asked questions. We try to update those as we go through each round and really try to make sure that we're getting the info out that folks need when applying to these funding rounds. So that's a quick overview of the entire community charging round, but what we'll do is jump into next, the Western region, and more specifics on the Western region today. So again, similar to the entire round, you can find all the information relevant to this region and the funding opportunity for it at that same website. We've tried to make this as easy as possible for folks to find everything. So on there, you'll find the funding opportunity. We do have an interactive map for some prioritization that we'll talk about in a little bit. We'll also post the recording for this webinar, including a copy of the slides, so you can click any of the links that we have here. Later on, you can reference those quite easily. The prioritization strategy. So again, we'll get into prioritization and what that means, but that's a document detailing how we went about the entire process of pulling together our priorities for the funding opportunity. There is a utility form. So this is required for any projects that will have a connection of 150 kilowatts or greater. So on there is the form itself, but also the contacts out at each of our utilities that would have to be submitted to. And then lastly, just some links that you can find certified EVITP electricians, which at least one of is being required for the NEVI projects. So diving a little bit more into the funding opportunity, it's broken down into a number of sections. So overall program description to start with. Then we get into each of the procedures, eligibility information. Some of what we shared today is also covered there in a lot more detail. And then program requirements and how to go through the proposal, all things that you'll need to know when you're building out your team and your proposal, figuring out your timelines and what your costs will be. Really, those are there for your reference to pull together the best possible proposal that you can. The document has a number of other resources. So in there, you can also see before it even opens what the questionnaire will look like, what the scoring rubric is that PennDOT will use to score projects that will score before selection. The utility form I mentioned a little bit ago, site design checklists that will give you an idea of the things that we look at when we step through approval for design reviews. Anything to do with certified payrolls and Davis-Bacon wage rates, you'll find all of that information there, which is very important for, again, pulling together your cost proposals for the project. And then a draft of the agreement. So we try to pull this together and standardize it across rounds so it's easy and familiar. Really, that agreement draft ideally won't change after we've gone through getting towards selection and making notice of selection to projects, but there is a chance that there are slight adjustments to it. We try to keep those minimal or to no changes if possible, so you can hopefully review the draft before even applying and know what you're getting into. All right, so covering the deeper timeline here specific to the Western region, first and foremost, we released the opportunity back on June 12th. So that is out there up on our website now. We made a number of announcements around that, which ideally is how you folks found out about this webinar here today on June 25th. There will be a deadline to submit that utility form. So really that starts anytime from today, mid-June, all the way out to early November 2026. So keep an eye out for that. That's up on our website. The deadline for any technical questions that you might have that either come out of our webinar today or leading up to August 27th, we can take those questions and answer them all the way out to August 27th. And then we'll post those back out on the website for folks to reference. Our e-grant system will open. This is probably one of the most important deadlines here on September 8th. So that's when we will open our system for actually taking in proposals in our online portal on September 8th. We'll then update our Davis-Bacon wage rates November 10th for any final wage rate updates. These are periodically updated. So we try to ensure that the most up-to-date and recent wage rates are available that are applicable to these projects. And then again, we'll have the deadline for those proposals opening September 8th, closing November 20th, sharp at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. We go through our review process. We'll start that just shortly after deadline proposal closes. And ideally, we're looking to complete these sometime around January, mid to late January likely, and turn that into conditional award notifications in February. After that, PennDOT completes the NEPA process, which is our environmental reviews. And then we go down the next steps of agreement execution following NEPA approval through April to May of next year. Again, want to stress that all publicly available locations are eligible as long as they are in the Western region. So I won't read these counties out to you, but the counties that are eligible for the Western region are listed here. And we did go through, as I mentioned earlier, a prioritization process. So in our mapping online interactive map, you can actually find the exact locations of the prioritized locations. We did that in partnership with our local transportation planning organizations. So there's a lot more detail in how we went about that process, but essentially these locations receive prioritization through scoring. And if you are proposing projects within those prioritized locations, they do get extra points towards scoring and selection consideration. If you have any questions about how these maps work, there's a number of things you might be curious about, whether your project actually falls within a prioritized location, whether it's eligible, or even questions towards things like publicly available. You can absolutely email our resource account. That goes to myself, Colton, and Dorothy, and we'll be able to get back to you fairly quickly. Again, we want to stress that we are not looking to have duplicative projects, so we'll absolutely take into consideration existing charging stations and locations nearby. So if there's questions on whether we would consider something duplicative, you can absolutely reach out to us and ask that question. But also on that map, we have the existing charging locations. So hopefully that's an easy reference for you to find existing chargers, where they are in relation to prioritized locations, and will give you a good idea of what PennDOT is prioritizing through scoring and selection for those projects. So again, we'll have all this stuff out on our website. There's a link to this map up there right now, so you can go in and check out the interactive GIS map and find all of this information on the region and the exact prioritized locations. Okay, I'm going to now turn it over to Colton to dive into a couple more details here on the Western region.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. So yeah, diving into a little bit more technical on the funding round, how things are working here. So as we've mentioned, the funding round overall is planning to award about $25 million in NEVI funds. That's just the federal share. That does not account for the match or non-funded portions of projects. That is not we have different targets for each of the counties. These formulas are largely based on population and the county's population share of the entire state's population. So the percentages are out of that you see on the screen are out of the total 100 million that we're looking to award through the 4 regional funding rounds. So, you know, a percent of 100 million fortunately works out to 1 million. So for each percentage you see there, we're looking to award about 1 million to projects within that county. So you can see that it's not, universally spread throughout the region, but it is spread based on the population of each of the counties. So if you've been paying attention to the southeastern region or watched the webinar for that region, you're probably seeing a lot of similar things from one region to the next. That is very intentional. There's few things that are changing between each of the community round regions. The primary things that change from one region to the next is the priority locations, those things that you just saw on the interactive map screenshot, and the priority use cases. I'll get into those in a few slides. One other thing that will actually appear a little different Southeast as compared to this Western region and moving forward is for Southeast, there is just a simple cap of 1 million in NEVI funding per project awarded. For the Western region, and we'll continue this through for the remaining regions. Some counties have projects that are located in some counties will have a lower cap of 500,000, and that's really because if you noticed on the slide before, there's a few counties where our target funding amount is less than 1 million. So since the county as a whole is not looking to award a full million, that's why the maximum award per a project in that county is lower. So that's just a few counties, certainly ones that have a bit less population than the others, but still a sizable cap of 500,000 to ensure that a good project can happen. Okay, so as you're thinking, is this relevant to me? Am I allowed to apply for this? The answer is very likely yes. All local governments, all incorporated entities, nonprofits, etc., are eligible to apply for this funding. Really, the only way that you would not be allowed to apply is if you're trying to apply as an individual. It has to be some sort of incorporated organization. If you're not registered, if you're a business and you're not registered with the Secretary of State to do business within Pennsylvania. And then lastly, if your organization is somehow not allowed to receive state or federal funding through a debarment, suspension, or outstanding obligation, we would not be allowed to award funding to that organization until such would be resolved. If you're thinking about putting a project together or what it would take to put a project together, we do like to note that these NEVI being a federal program, there's certainly quite a variety of requirements that come both at the project level and on the the implementation side. So in terms of the actual charging station itself, it must comply with 23 CFR 680. That is the regulation that governs all NEVI funds. We have some of those key requirements listed here. That includes that every location, every project must include at least 4 charging ports. That means you can charge 4 vehicles at the same time. You have to have a CCS connector for every DC fast charging port, a J1772 connector for each level 2 charging port. You can have other connectors as well, but every charging port must have one of those 2 connector types depending on the charger type. The chargers must be available for public use at least as frequently as the host business or facility is publicly available. So if the business hours of the facility are Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, then the chargers must be available for public use at least that much. There cannot be any access restrictions during public hours. So there cannot be employee only or customer only. You cannot have those sorts of restrictions. It does not meet the requirement for being publicly available. Level 2 charging ports must be Energy Star certified. You must have at least 2 of the 4 parking spaces associated with the chargers have to be compliant with ADA. So essentially spacing, size of the parking space, access aisle, things like that. And for those level 2 chargers, there is a minimum of a 6 kilowatt minimum continuous power from every charging port at the same time. DC fast chargers do not have a minimum power level. All right, one additional requirement to tack on. This is just for projects that are located along an alternative fuel corridor. So we showed maps of those earlier, and designed to serve travelers of the alternative fuel corridor. So basically you're located close to an exit off of a major highway, and your station is designed to really serve those individuals that are looking to get off, get a quick charge, and get back on the roadway. So in that scenario, the chargers must be DC fast chargers. They must all have a continuous and simultaneous power rating of at least 150 kilowatt from each port, and that must be available for public use 24/7, not just the hours of the host business. Okay, so some requirements on the project itself and implementing it. So we again reference 23 CFR 680. That's a good go-to for knowing what the federal rules are. And then there's just a few things that we add, that PennDOT adds as our own requirements. But of course, there is the minimum of 20% matching funds. So NEVI cannot fund any more than 80% of a project's cost, eligible project cost. Equipment must comply with Buy America. Davis-Bacon Act, minimum wage rates must be paid for all individuals performing construction labor on the project. You have to use qualified technicians, such as EVITP certified electricians for performing that labor. You have to follow program income requirements. That basically means that you cannot make an excessive profit off of the charging station during the 5 years of required operations and maintenance. Customer pricing must be reasonable. During those 5 years of operations, the chargers must have an uptime of greater than 97%. You must provide avenues for customer service during all hours that the chargers are available for public use. There's a requirement that data is made available free of charge to third-party software developers regarding the station. So namely, like the station status, its current pricing, and some other information has to be made available via an API. And then there is quarterly and annual data reporting requirements throughout those 5 years of operations. So there are other requirements as well, but we wanted to get an overview of some of the bigger ones or noteworthy ones, so that you're aware of what's involved in making a project happen. So also throughout the project, there is a variety of deliverables that are due at different project stages. So, for example, during the design phase, in addition to completing the engineering design of the project, installing the chargers, as well as getting the local permits, we also require a local workforce plan detailing how local workforces will be used as much as possible on the installation of the project. During the operations phase, so around the time the station becomes operational, is when we will look for an operations and maintenance plan, a cybersecurity plan, and a commissioning report. And then throughout those 5 years of operations, we have the quarterly and annual reporting, as mentioned on the last slide, and annual updates to the cybersecurity plan. So diving into what is eligible for reimbursement on these projects. So first note that all payments are on a reimbursement basis. So the funding awardee would incur costs, they would pay those costs, and then they would submit to PennDOT to have those costs reimbursed. So the general overview rule is that the cost must be directly related to the charging of EVs to the EV charging station project to be eligible for reimbursement. So you also are only able to be reimbursed for costs that are incurred after the agreement, the contract between PennDOT and the NEVI awardee is executed. The one exception here is that equipment that's purchased prior to the agreement but held as inventory and then allocated to the project after the agreement execution remains eligible. In that case, we consider the date that the cost was incurred or incurred for the project to be the date that's allocated to the project rather than the date that the equipment was actually physically purchased. We do also have a much longer and more detailed list of specific eligible and ineligible costs in the funding opportunity. Funding opportunity really is your go-to resource for every bit of information you could want. So see that if you're looking for more specifics on what's eligible for reimbursement. Okay, so if you have a project and you're working towards getting ready to apply, some things to know here. As we mentioned, the eGrant system will open for proposals on September 8th. If you were to go to eGrants right now, it would let you start working on a proposal. That's because the Southeast region is open right now. So we would not advise starting your proposal until the Western region proposal round officially opens on September 8th. So to prepare a proposal, certainly review the funding opportunity, be aware of all program rules and steps. It's also helpful to review the technical questions and answers file that's on the website as well as a companion to the funding opportunity. Confirm the location is eligible, so it's within one of those Western region counties. If it's not within a Western region county, then it would be eligible for a different region's funding round. So need to apply for at the appropriate time for that region's funding round. If the project will include a utility connection of 150 kilowatt or greater, then submit the electric utility form to the utility no later than November 5th. That way they have at least 15 days from the time they receive the form until the proposal deadline to complete the form and get it back to you, and you can submit the proposal with it as an attachment. Identify any project vendors and partners that you plan to work with on the project. So if you don't know a particular project team member, such as you don't know the installation company or who's going to do the networking, whatever it is, we have a process for that. It's there's instructions for it in the proposal. Basically, just identify what minimum expectations, qualifications you would have for that firm when it is later selected. You'll want a site schematic. There's a list of what we want to see on that site schematic in the proposal. Get a letter of commitment from the owner of the property that you're looking to do the project, if that entity is a different legal entity than who is applying for the funding. And develop a detailed project budget and an amount of funding that you're requesting in NEVI for the project. So our key deadlines here, just putting it all in one place because they were covered at different times here, putting it all together. The deadlines, technical questions are to be submitted by August 17th. So that way we have time to provide responses to those before the eGrant system opens for proposals. The utility form for those larger projects with utility connection of 150 kilowatt or greater should be submitted to your utility no later than November 5th. And then lastly, the all-important one on November 20th at exactly 5 o'clock Eastern time, the grant system will stop accepting proposals. So the submit button will either not work or it will disappear. There will not be a way to submit. We will not consider any late proposals. It does go by the second. Mentioned before is that we have a very detailed scoring rubric in that funding opportunity. So if you're looking to know how we're going to be evaluating your project, then look here. It has the scoring breakdown for each of the items and questions. And further, it has the same instructions and information that will be available to our scoring team when they're evaluating your proposals. So this is the information we will use to score, and it's the information available to you to know how we will score. A large portion of each project's score, certainly not all, but a large portion is based on some location attributes. So just wanted to summarize those here in one place. So first we have the community needs score. That's worth up to 7 points. You can see the community needs score for any location in the Western region by using that interactive map. It is calculated at the census tract level, and anywhere between 0 and 7 is a possible score. We have the priority location score. You were able to see those kind of green polygons on the screenshot of our interactive map. So again, go to the interactive map to see where those priority locations are. This is a binary, 7 points or 0 points. Locations within a priority location get 7 points. Locations not in a priority location get 0. So this can certainly be a factor, but as mentioned multiple times, we are still looking for projects in all locations. They're all considered, they will all be eligible. And there's many other scoring items that first and foremost, we're looking for good projects. So please don't be discouraged if your idea for a location is not within a priority location. And then lastly, we have the EV charging priority use cases, which I'll cover more on the next slide. So similar to the priority locations, these are developed by the transportation planning partners in each region. So there was 4 such planning agencies in the Western region. We have a separate companion document to the funding opportunity that goes through more detail on how the planning partners provided their feedback, how it was built up into these priorities. But for the sake of applying, for the sake of knowing how we're going to score, this is the final product. So if you're interested in the background, you can look into it, but it's not necessary to apply or to know how we will be scoring. So a location that addresses one or more of these prioritized EV charging use cases receives scoring points. We have information in the scoring rubric in Appendix 4 that has more detail on how each of these, how priority use cases impact that score up to a maximum of 7. And these are one of those just couple items that vary from one funding round to another. So when we come out with the next regions, they will certainly have different prioritized EV charging use cases. Some other larger scoring items that we wanted to call attention to. This is collectively what we'll call availability and amenities. So we have a public availability score. This one is a little different. Locations that have a that will be available for public charging 24/7 receive a score of 0, whereas projects that have very limited availability for public can have up to -20. So this is really to incentivize projects that will be available to the public as much as possible. That's not to say that you have to be 24/7 by any means. It's just a way to encourage and to select those projects where all else is equal. So there's a sliding scale for all the scenarios in the middle, and there's also some examples in there about what would really make a project be considered very limited public availability. So see the scoring rubric for more info there. We have 6 points for customer safety enhancements, such as lighting, high foot traffic area, security cameras, etc., and 10 points for amenities, features, and destinations. So this is based on the number, quality, relevance, and availability of nearby amenities, features, and destinations, and whether they align with the proposed charging speed and charging port count of the project. The single largest scoring item in our rubric, worth 20 out of 100 points, is the funding request. In order to ensure that level 2 projects and DC fast projects are evaluated fairly against each other, the funding request score is based on the amount of NEVI funding requested for the project per kilowatt of charging capacity once the project would be installed. So the most cost-effective project would receive 20 points, so that has the lowest funding request per kilowatt. And then the project from this region's funding round with the highest funding request per kilowatt of charging capacity would receive 0 points, with a sliding scale in between for all others. Note that no more than 175 kilowatt per DC fast charger or 13.3 kilowatt per level 2 charger is considered just for the purposes of creating that ratio, the cost to kilowatt ratio. I think we have some examples there in section 3B of the funding opportunity. So lastly, we will work towards scoring and selection and announcing awards from this funding round. So that's likely to be, my apologies, that date was not updated. So this funding round closes in November, so it would likely be around February that we would announce the awards from this round. We'll get that corrected for the slides that we put online. And note that we'll initially make conditional awards and notices of non-selection, but that notice of non-selection is not necessarily permanent. If we have conditional awards that withdraw, we can choose to offer conditional award to projects that were initially not selected. Okay. I'll leave you with some other resources that the PennDOT has available on our website or other State Department websites related to EVs. Really just want to call attention to one here at the top, the EVs in Focus video series. This was recently completed. We now have all 5 videos available online. Each one is topical, such as battery fires or the electric grid, really meant to just provide some non-biased factual information to the public that may have questions on electric vehicles in Pennsylvania. So it's a fun one if you're interested and want to check it out. With that, we will open it up for questions. Feel free to type those in the chat. Also, if you prefer to ask yours out loud, just let us know in the chat that you would like the ability to unmute. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, we have one question from Brittany. Those limitations, are those per charging port or per station?
Okay, I'm guessing that was a few slides ago, and I'm just not remembering what limitations is being referenced here. Yes, so that would be, yes, go ahead.
45, I mean, that's slide 45, public availability limitations, maybe?
Yeah, so based on the comment, that was related to the max kilowatt. So it'll be per port.
Okay.
Yeah, so we would consider up to 175 per DC fast port, up to 13.3 kilowatt per level 2 port. One other smaller scoring item that wasn't mentioned in our list here is that there is a scoring item for power sharing. So projects that power share, as opposed to just having a dedicated fixed power to each charging port, have some scoring preference there. But yeah, so that's the max, again, just for this calculation. You can have higher maximum power outputs. It's just that's what we will use for this calculation and determine the cost effectiveness of the project.
Okay, thank you, Colton. The next question is from Charles. He was wondering if this call is recorded, so giving people the ability to rewatch. And Derek answered in the chat, yes, we'll have the recording and a copy of the slides on our website shortly after. Is there any other questions? That's all in the chat, but you're welcome to raise your hand. We'll unmute you.
All
And you
right.
can, and you can also write to us on at this email that you see on the screen. That will go to all of us. Charles is typing. Let's wait a minute and see what. It's on the hot seat now. For the Southeast projects, what score should we focus on?
Not sure exactly what we're 80. So in general, projects with the highest scores from a given funding round will be considered first for awards. We have a section within the funding opportunity that goes over our process for selection. So first and foremost, we give every project a score. We rank all of them, and then there's some adjustments that we can make from there to ensure that there's some regional variety, to ensure that we're getting close to the funding targets for each county, things like that. So yeah, I wouldn't focus on a particular raw number that for your goal, because it's really just going to be relative to everything that comes in from the same funding round.
All right, thank you, Colton. Are there any other questions? Okay, if not, thank you all for attending, and I hope you all have a very nice afternoon. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.